Most AI writing is slop. Unless you're spending hours babysitting prompts, you're getting generic output. And when you do put in that effort, you're not writing, you're holding the AI's hand, explaining what you want, reprompting, guiding it towards something usable and that sounds like you. I'm Danny, the general manager of Spiral. I spent 7 months rebuilding it from the ground up to solve this problem. Spiral is now an AI writing partner with taste. In this conversation with AI and I host Dan Schipper, you'll hear how I use AI tools like Droid and Claude Code to build a really beautiful and intentional AI writing experience, how we taught models to judge their own writing, and the philosophy behind making an AI writing partner instead of a slot machine. By the way, this intro was co-written by Spiral. Let's get into it.
7-8 months, we went through a ton of iterations, and then you were like, I want to make this the most beautiful fucking app I've ever made. Like, show us the app right now. Show us what it looks like.
Okay, so here we are. This is the new Spiral. And there's like so many tiny moments that we like thought about on this. James and I and Lucas, we all really just like spend a lot of time thinking about like what is the experience that you want to have when you come here. And, it's very subtle. This is one thing that I love it every single time, but we have this like slight papery feeling effect. It's noise, but in the background, it feels like it's paper. We intentionally chose this like typeface.
Wait, I want to pause you here. Like, just looking at this, right? There's so much here. There's obviously like, what are we writing today, Danny? And for people who are listening, there's like there's the box where you type in the post you want to write about. And then there's like a plus button where you can attach more context. There's a microphone button where you can talk to it. There's a styles button where you can add styles, but then there's a whole sidebar of different workspaces. And within each workspace, you have different products. There are these little icons. It's like, there's one for Cora. So if you want to write about Cora, another product, like you can go in there and that's all beautifully designed. And then there's like a history. And what I want to emphasize to your point is you built all of this by yourself. That is crazy. That would have been totally impossible a year ago, or 2 years ago. And so I think you're making a really important point about what you can achieve with these tools if you use them well and you want to make something great.
Yeah. I think it really, it allows you to go from like idea to something really quickly. And I think you can go from something to like something beautiful also really quickly. And I worked with some really talented people like Lucas, James, we all jumped in here. And I think the really cool thing was that it allowed, both Lucas and James, who are not engineers, to like mess around in Claude and be like, oh, can we figure this out? Like, to your point of, being able to speak to it, we have like a monologue integration and we have this like dithering animation. And I think Lucas made the first one in like a code sandbox using Claude. And then we like iterated from there and then messed around in Figma. So like it allows also a bunch of people to jump in and, who aren't necessarily engineers to like help play around and like take it to that final place.
So that makes a lot of sense. For people who are not as familiar with the Every ecosystem, Monologue is another product that we build internally. And so now Spiral connects to Monologue, which is super cool. And that would actually be kind of fun to talk about. But why don't you show us how Spiral works, just so we get a sense for, okay, once you're like opening the Pandora's box of it, like what is possible. And then what's really interesting to me right now is I want to learn more about your workflow, because I think we do a ton of Claude Code content on Every, and you are actually a droid boy. And I feel like you have some ways of working that are maybe a little bit different from some of the stuff that we've done previously. And this is really making me, one of the things I feel about you is just from looking at your hair and how beautiful your hair is. And also that leather jacket you're wearing, you really have this, and you've said this before about yourself, you have this like, measure twice, cut once mentality where you're a craftsman. And, I think that has come through in this product. It has come through in how you, think about building a tool for writers. And I think that to a point you made earlier, it's sort of at odds with what people think you can build with AI. It's like, oh, you're just gonna make slop, and actually you can build beautiful things with AI. And I think you're a really good example of that. So let's start with using Spiral.
Okay. Thank you for those lovely words, by the way. So I actually prepared beforehand, talking about this interview with Spiral, and I thought that could be kind of meta to go through.
That's
and
really
see,
cool.
How it worked. So first of all, I did it inside the Spiral workspace, and the whole idea of workspaces is kind of like projects in ChatGPT or Claude, which is like, it just has documents and stuff and context beforehand. And so it knows what you're talking about. And so I literally said like, hey, I'm about to jump on a podcast with Dan to talk about you. Help me prepare some notes. And what it actually did, well, that was a little janky, I got to fix that. But one of the things that it did was that it asked itself, what do I know about myself? And it kind of like thought about it, and it sort of spat it all out and was like, hey, here are a bunch of things that you could talk to about Dan. Like, most AI writing is slop, Spiral has taste. We could talk about what makes Spiral different. It chats first and it interviews. It explores 3 different angles. These are all things to come. We can also talk about the evolution story. So Spiral like suggested a bunch of things to me. And then I could, then the first thing that Spiral does is it asks questions. It always wants to know more concrete details from you. And so it asked, would you like me to expand or help you think through specific stories or examples that you could share? And so I said, actually, one of the other things I want to talk about is like the sheer number of iterations that we went through, testing and experimenting. And then Spiral again looked through what it knew of the story of Spiral and kind of came through, here are these different like arcs, the realization, the old one isn't working, the pivot. And then it started asking me questions for each one. Like, what was the first thing that I tried differently? When did the chat first insight emerge? How many iterations did I go through? What did you learn about what makes writing good that surprised you? And so like, it's gone through its understanding of itself, but it's asking me questions all along the way to like really figure out concretely, what the hell is it that I'm actually trying to say? And this is like super useful because I think a lot of the times when I've gone to old Spiral and other AI tools to like ask for something, it may ask questions, but usually you have to prompt it to ask you questions. And the questions don't really help me really think about what I'm saying that well. We had an early user who said something about Spiral. He said that Spiral helped him go downstream from the original thought that he shared with Spiral, as opposed to it just being a repurposing of the original thought that he shared. And I think that like put it really like well and succinctly of like Spiral will help you take that initial like jumble of thoughts that you had and go a little bit further with it from these questions, which I think is like super useful in figuring out what it is that you're trying to say. And I guess it's also like seeing it from different perspectives also helps really like understand the shape of the thing that you're trying to talk about. Yeah, so I monologued into it a bunch of stuff and then sort of like helped me like think through the different things that I wanted to talk about right now. So that's the interviewing part of Spiral and like sort of figuring things out.
And I just want to like pause you there. I think the interview thing is an interesting thing, and it's one of the things that we came to very early on in this process because we were thinking about, how do you build a writer with taste? And one of the metaphors that we use to think about this is, how would a person do this? And I think that's a really good and important metaphor for building AI products. Is if you're building an agent, first you have to think about like, how does an actual person do the task that the agent is going to do? And so, I was thinking about, for me in my writing, how do I ghostwrite for people well? And in order to do that well, I would need I need to get a sense of who that person is and like ask them questions about it. And there's this like, mutual discovery process. And you took that and like built this basically like interview mode, which I think is one of the things that makes this really different. Is its job is not to just spit out the answer right away, because that's how you get slop. It does spit out an answer if it knows who you are and what you want and all that kind of stuff. Because if you've built a relationship with a ghostwriter, for example, and you're doing something like what you've done before, that is actually can be a pretty quick process. But otherwise, a good ghostwriter, their job is to make you feel seen, like really get underneath the thing that you're trying to do. And that's how you ghostwrite something that feels like it came from the person and isn't just like some generic bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think LLMs are, and this actually goes deeper into the story of how else this product works, but LLMs are great at doing that, just sort of like helping you see things from an infinite number of like perspectives. And I think one of the things that we spent a lot of time with the prompt for the interviewer inside Spiral is like yes-anding you, sort of, coming from like improv, is it always kind of has to like provide value in the questions. Like some questions are kind of annoying, and it's like, if it's not providing value, and we try our best for it's like yes and like it is giving me a lot of questions like help me, like, how do you encode, asking good questions to the prompts, which is kind of what you just asked. And so like it's thinking through all of the things. And to your point of like slop, one of the things that we were very intentional on of like, we're going to use a reasoning model and we're actually going to show the user all of the reasoning, and you can see it all because we're calling it a writing partner. And I think that word partner is really important. I think it's kind of one of those like principles that we've anchored everything around. And with like any good collaborator or partner that you're working with, whether it's writing or, engineering or design, understanding the perspective that they're coming from and how they're thinking about the thing helps you understand like, oh, this is where they're thinking about it. This is where here's where there's a delta between how I'm thinking about it and how they're thinking about it. Or like, oh, they've got it completely wrong. They've understood something incorrectly or differently from how I have. And it's really useful to be able to like look at the thinking. When you start a conversation with Spiral, the thinking is open by default. You don't have to click it open, as opposed to, other AI apps, they do show you the thinking, but you have to click it open. I think that's a very small, tiny, intentional thing of like, we want you to read it, like actually understand what it's doing, because if it's doing something you don't want it to do, you still be able to see that and you can just tell it. I think that's super important in building something that everybody else is trying to make content. Like his, even the old version of Spiral is like an infinite number of, it'll spit out an infinite number of things at a click of a button. And I think we've gone completely the opposite way, where we've kind of zagged and been like, let's go slowly. Like we're going to use a thinking model and it's going to think for quite a few seconds and slow down, be a bit more intentional, answer the questions. And sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes the questions are annoying. But sometimes, and like more and more and more, the questions are really helpful of being like, oh yes, that's exactly what I meant. Or it'll ask me, a question and I'd be like, you're way off, dude. And here is actually what I mean. But that helps me articulate what I actually mean because you're asking me this question that's like way over left field.
Totally. Okay. So I think we've gone through the interview stuff. Now show us, once it's gotten a sense of who you are and what you're trying to do, how does it, we really focus this around short form content. So like tweets, LinkedIn posts, emails, other types of like short form marketing type stuff. How does it, how do you actually make something with this once it's interviewed you?
So usually when you start with it, most people will say, help me write a LinkedIn tweet, X post, email, blah, blah, blah. So usually by the time you've answered quite a few of its questions, it will just be like, great, I'm ready. Let's start writing. But in this case, I'm just going to say, hey, help me write a banger tweet about this, even though I started with saying I'm doing a podcast. And the first thing that it's going to do is reason over all the things that you asked it, that you've like replied to it with. And then one of the things that we learned sort of in the journey of building this is this needed to be a multi-agent system. Like having one big model do both the interviewing and the writing just really didn't work. As we tried to layer on more functionality, it just started to break because of context rot. All of these labs are talking about 1 million context windows, or 1 million token context windows. And it's just like, yes, it can do that, but how well can it actually pay attention to all those tokens? Just clearly isn't there yet. So we have a handoff system where the interviewer gives it to the writer, but actually they share the entire same context window. So it's not a summary of the previous thing. It's not like a tool call where the interviewer is summarizing the conversation to the writer. We're literally taking the previous context window and just right into a new system prompt, right into a new system context window, just being like, hey, here's your previous chat. And we do some prompting to make the writer like understand what's happening, like, hey, you're coming from the interviewer and that kind of stuff. And so like we just saw here, it did a bunch of thinking. And the first thing that it did is it spat out 3 options. And we have this UI where you can kind of explore all 3 right in one go. And it's thought a lot about what we've said. And the reason that we did this is I think when we first started down this process of creating a new product, I think you were really, really interested in the idea of exploring the sort of infinite canvas of possibilities that LLMs could give. And this was like something you were really, really excited about, and like traversing up the tree and then like branching from the tree.
The tree thing.
Yeah, like March 2025 was a lot of trees and thinking about trees. I actually vividly remember. I think it was like a Thursday or a Friday, and I was in our old office in Manhattan. And you just like sent me a fucking tree on Discord. Like it was like here in Brooklyn. It was probably like in Fort Greene or something. You just sent me a picture of a tree. I was like, this fucking guy. Yeah, we were really, really interested about this idea. I mean, it's true, right? Because they can just produce an infinite number of tokens, and you can kind of explore all these different ways of saying the same thing. I think what we realized is, one, from the same context window, every single iteration that you ask it for, it just degrades in quality. And we even see that still today with Spiral. Like we're still not there yet with like its writing ability. But there is still something really interesting there about this, seeing things from different angles and sort of pruning and being like, or like recently I've been saying like chiseling marble. You start with this like blank slate. Maybe it's not the best analogy because you have these whatever, but you kind of like pick and choose what works and what doesn't work. So it starts off in this UI. You have 3 options, and very quickly, it gives you sort of titles of like what is the general gist of this version. So this is like an honest realization. This one's more about the failed experiment, and this one is like questions over drafts. And I think we spent a lot of time thinking about how do you actually interact with these 3 options, because chat is one thing. I can come in here and I can like type, but also we kind of want the AI and you to be able to interact with all 3 of these things. So right now Spiral can read all 3 of these things. It has context of what's open, so like if I close one, it knows that there's only 2 open right now. If I like close all of them, it'll understand that. But also if I make edits, it understands about the manual edits that I've made. The other thing that we can do is you can just come over here and you can just highlight things. Like I can say, here's a bunch of stuff across all 3 that I don't like these. Remove them. And I can still collaborate with Spiral across all 3 drafts. It doesn't have to be one draft at a time. And it kind of just like allows me to go and traverse the tree, but just 3 at a time. Like there's only so many that I can handle mentally. It's also text. I think one of the things that we learned over the last like 6-7 months is I think everybody is really used to, from tools like Midjourney, seeing multiple options when it comes to image generation, but text generation, like multiple options, is really hard to parse what the hell the differences are. Like you can tell, okay, the middle one here is bigger, but like, is it that much better? And so 3 kind of felt like that perfect middle ground between showing you multiple options but not overwhelming you. So yeah, that's how it works. And typically when I use it, when I've noticed a lot of our users using it, they sort of start here, they'll find one angle and they're like, I don't want to go down this angle, I want to go down these 2 angles.
I like the first one. The questions is greater than drafts. I think that's actually the hook actually got me.
Right. And so like that's typically what happens with people. They use it, they're like, that one didn't get me, but that one got me. And they'll find bits that they like and they'll bring them over. And then, a couple of more conversations back and forth, and they'll find something that they're like pretty happy with. So yeah, that's just generally how it works. Like we're calling it a writing partner. A big part of that is that it talks to you, has conversations, asks you questions, and then it drafts. And it's just like very helpful in drafting across 3 different things. You can, I can ask it for, hey, give me a bunch of options for the hook. And we have this UX where it'll generate a bunch of different options within one specific draft, and you can kind of very quickly change them and switch them out and see what works and what doesn't work. And we've like taken a lot of inspiration from Claude Code. So it has all these tool calls of like, it reads the draft, and then it'll like then make edits. So like I built an AI, so like I go next, here's another one, there's another one. I can always go back and see the original. Here's another one.
Oh, interesting. I've never even seen this. This is really cool.
Yeah.
You're building so fast, I can't even keep up.
Yeah. And so like, there's a lot of tiny little moments like this that we've added to like help make it sort of useful to do that. That's kind of currently where it is. Like we have, like we talked about workspaces, we have writing styles, which is very much grounded in what old Spiral was. You give it a bunch of examples. It tries its best to emulate that writing style. And again, I think one of the things that I think I found over this experience is that writing is something that is fluid. I think when we first started this experience, one of the things that I did actually was I read this book. I read Why I Write by George Orwell. And this was written during the Second World War. When I was reading it, I was like, this writing kind of sucks. There's some parts of this that I didn't like. And I think that made me realize how much the way that we talk, the way that we communicate changes so much. And so like good writing is so fluid. I think that's something that I've had to come to accept. And, we're not training our own model. I think we kind of was like, how far can we push frontier models? And just with prompting and sort of context management and like sort of ergonomics and doing handoffs and that kind of stuff. And there's so much of that training data that is slop. And that is something that I think we're like, it's interesting. I remember when we first started this, I was going down this very much like rules-based approach. All of my prompting had these like rubrics with scores, and I would ask the writer to like score itself of how well did it write a hook. And none of that worked. It was all really bad. And I think we decided to move more into like, let's allow it to be fluid. Let's allow it to like be flexible. Like, let's not constrain it with these really hard rules. And that plus sort of the most recent generation of models, sort of Claude 4, GPT-5, they unlocked a new like level of capabilities that just wasn't possible for, especially for writing, especially for like interviewing well and reasoning over a long context window. And yeah.
I mean, I love all of that. I think that the thing that's in my head about this is just looking at this and listening to you talk. I'm just like, I'm so proud of you because where you were 8 months ago is so different, and where the product was is so different. And you've just taken this thing and completely reinvented it. And it's, and in a lot of ways, I think you've reinvented the product. And I think I don't know if you've reinvented yourself necessarily, but you've certainly push yourself in this new direction to really understand what makes writing great. And it's just awesome to watch. And what I want people to see is where you started. So could you open up old Spiral so we can show them what that looked like, so they can get a sense for like how different it was?
And interestingly, this is not the first version of Spiral. This is...
I guess that's true.
Yes. So the first version of Spiral was AI generated slop by Dan Shepard. No, I'm joking.
It was. That's my specialty.
At Every, we run 4 AI products in-house, and we just launched a new one. When we needed to build a beautiful landing page for it, we used Framer. Most design tools lock the good stuff behind a paywall. Expensive and definitely not fun. Framer is different. Framer already built the fastest way to publish beautiful production-ready websites, and it's now redefining how we design for the web. With the recent launch of Design Pages,
a free canvas-based design tool,
Framer is more than just a site builder. From social assets to campaign visuals to vectors and icons, all the way to a live site. Framer is where ideas go live from start to finish. Your entire workflow lives in one place. No Figma imports, no messy HTML. Design your end result in Framer and it turns into a working website. Faster, cleaner, and more efficient. Because Framer is a true design tool that also publishes professional production-ready sites, you get features like P3 color spaces, SVG animation, inline editing, and precise scaling. It'll help you stand out as a professional. Ready to design, iterate, and publish all in one tool? Start for free at framer.com/design and use the code DAN to get a free month of Pro. Rules and restrictions may apply, as always. And now, back to the episode.
So this is the current or the previous version of Spiral. It got a bit of a facelift when I first joined about a year ago or so now. And what it does is you will feed it examples. You would feed it examples of writing that you liked. And then you would give it a new input and it would try its best to recreate that examples that you gave it. So here's one, rough outlines into punchy short tweets is one of the spirals. And the way that it worked is we just gave it a bunch of these examples of things. Like, look, Japan's population is collapsing. And what it would do is it would take all those examples and it would create like basically a style guide. And then, the prompting was very simple. You would just give it, let's take maybe just the prompt for that. Let's see what that does with that. And then it would just like generate 3. And there are people who still use this today. I think there is like certain parts of Every that still uses this for like summaries and bullet points of things. And this allowed you to very quickly get some options. I think what was interesting to me was that this was a great first start for last year. I think that's why a lot of people kind of gravitated toward this. It was like, oh, it's made well. What it said that it did, it definitely did it. But I think we would look at the outputs that came out of this and we're just like, ugh, it's not there. And then this paradigm didn't allow for collaborating. And I tried to hack it a bunch of ways. Like I had
collaborating with the AI specifically.
Collaborating with the AI,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I tried to add on a bunch of things. Like, a lot of people who still use this today will like write custom instructions, and that's where they will try and like push the AI towards where they're actually trying to go. But then it never really worked. And yeah, I think we saw usage declining. And like personally for me, I never liked the stuff that came out of it, and I never found myself going reaching for it ever for anything. And when I did, it was because I was like, I should be. It very much felt like I should be using the product that I'm claiming to wanting to work on. But as I've learned over, the last couple of years, shoulds are not what I should actually be doing with my life. And yeah, I think it was also this like interesting tension of there's people who actually use this thing. There's still people who use this thing today, which is really cool. But I'm struggling to care, and we're not using it. And I think one of the things that has become very apparent for the product studio over the last couple of months is if we're not using it, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if other people are using it. I think, Naveen in Monologue is such a good example of that. Like he just hammered away for months until he found something that he was really excited about and everybody else was excited about. And then he hammered away until it actually worked. Like I think out of everybody at Every, I was the last holdout to use Monologue because he just wasn't there yet. And then he got me. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned at the product studio is like, I think if we're super excited about it and the people around us are super excited about it, like let's just do it and it's going to be great. Yeah. And this, I don't think any of us were excited about this anymore.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of lessons in here for me is one of them is, like when I first built the first version of Spiral, it was very cool. But things move so fast in AI that because it stayed with this sort of like text transformation thing, as soon as the models got better, it needed to be totally different. And we just didn't do that basically. And so that's one thing. Another thing is, it really underscored for me how important a daily use product is. And it forced me to think about, how useful is this sort of text transformation for a writer and how often am I going to need to do that? And also how complicated it is to actually produce really good content and how hard it is to do that in a one-shot way. And that we needed something like more dynamic. But I think the biggest thing is I built the first version of this and then handed it off to you. And this is something that we've seen a lot actually now. We've seen it with you. We've seen it with Yash, who is building Sparkle, which is something that I built in like 2020. There's this process that a GM has to go through if you're working on something that's not yours to like fully own it. Because I think, 7 or 8 months ago, whenever that was, you came to me and you're like, I don't know if I'm the right guy for this. Like, I don't know if I should be working on this. And you were just banging your head against the wall being like, I got to get the MRR up. And, and that sucked to see. And when we dug into it together, it was clear that, you didn't have a vision for it because it didn't feel like yours.
Yeah.
And then that was really demotivating. And for me, I was like, well, I mean, I have 1,000 things. Like, I can give you a bunch of stuff, but like, I don't think that solves the problem because like, I'm not the GM. Like, you have to solve the problem, and I can be there to support and help and whatever. And, I sort of put it to you, is this like what you want to spend your life on? Like, do you want to work on this or do you want to do something else? Because if you want to do something else, one of the lovely things about the setup we have at Every is you can do something else. Like, it's not like, the funding runs out and then, the startup fails. It's like, okay, this didn't work. Great. Let's do something else. Let's keep experimenting. And I think you went back and thought a lot about, do I care about this problem? Do I really actually want to make great writing? Or I think what you came to is the thing that motivates you is the great writing bit, and the text transformation for marketing was not that interesting to you. Tell me about that.
I think, the journey was really interesting. I think it was March. I'd spent January, February, and March just like dragging myself out of bed, just like feeling guilt. And we had that conversation. And I think the thing that I realized was that good writing is downstream of good thinking. And that is a really interesting problem of everybody is going towards, let me just generate 1,000 things, make 1 million blog posts, put out a bunch of tweets, AI generated replies. And I just think is like, what do I want to do myself? I think I want to be intentional with what I write. I want to be intentional with what I think. I want to be intentional with what I say. But that doesn't mean that like, I have to shun away modern tools. I have to shun away this crazy, we've made sand think. I'm not going to say no to that. But like, how can I use it in a way that it actually helps like yes and me, or like, gives me that, it's the sum are greater than equal than its parts, or whatever that phrase is, and I think that
the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Dan Shipper steals hats and he steals words out of my mouth. We can cut that.
I think I said that in our Q4 kickoff. So who's stealing from who?
That's fair. And I think just like I think there's something really powerful with good writing, or like, it's not even about good writing. Articulating what you want to say to the world well can do so many things. Not to like go all crazy and be like, this changes the world, but like good writing, good thinking, good articulating moves mountains. It moves people. It gets people to do crazy things that they think is like impossible. It gets people to, shun the status quo. It gets people to like, do all sorts of things. And I worry about a world where people are like, cool, I'll just let ChatGPT do all the thinking for me. I'll let Claude do all the thinking for me. It's like, no, like let's use it intentionally. And I think what that requires is, if you go back to the first podcast that we did, I actually said this, where it's like, most people aren't good prompters. 99% of people who are using AI are probably rubbish prompters. And I still think there is this beautiful space for building products where it's like, hey, don't worry about the prompting. Just like, use the product well, and if the product is designed and prompted well to do the thing that I think it should be out in the world, which is taking a beat and actually thinking about what you're writing, AI can help you do that. But I think the models as they are, the path of least resistance is just give me this, just right. Don't make me think. And I don't think we should exist in that world. And I think deep down people don't want to exist in that world. And AI, we don't have to be Luddites. We don't have to shun away AI to still have that world. We can have both.
I totally agree. And I think that is a really natural segue into how are you building this? And what are the things that you're using to make such a polished product, fully featured product, useful product as one engineer?
Yeah. It's, to your point of the models just change so quickly. The tooling changes so quickly. Like, if I think back to where we were in March when we first started this, I was probably bouncing around from Cursor to Windsurf, and that was it. And
Windsurf was the new thing. It was like, whoa, it was the first thing that was a little bit agentic.
Yeah. They had their like Cascade feature. And Cascade was so different, and it was like agentic, and it would do all this stuff. And now I'm in my terminal all of the time. The one thing I regret is learning how to use Vim, because I never use Vim anymore. I'm never like bouncing around the text editor in Vim anymore. Shout out to all the people who know how to use Vim. And so now I'm completely inside my terminal. For a very long time, it was all Claude Code. And as people who know about we all love Claude Code. I think Claude Code was that first thing that like kind of got rid of the fluff. You don't need an IDE. You don't need all of this. It's just like text input, give the agent a bunch of tools. And it's actually not that many tools. It's read and edit, which is like kind of all it did to begin with, and like make to-dos for yourself. I think that's the first 3 tools that Claude Code probably had.
And use
Bash.
That's it.
And use Bash, right. So 4 things. And it was amazing. The models itself were really good. And then Claude 4, I think there was this moment, at least this year, who knows, probably by next year, it's not going to matter. But Claude 4, I think, for me, feels like such a pivotal moment in this space, because I think it just unlocked so much capability in programming, writing, and like a lot of things. I guess the other thing to say is like that also opened up the space for everybody else to try this. So there's so many CLI tools now. We have AMP, OpenAI have their Codex, and most recently I've been using Factory's Droid, and I've completely fallen in love with Droid. And one of the reasons why, and we can jump into it and I'll share my screen, but I think one of the reasons why is that Droid is model agnostic, almost. They give you 5 models to play with. They give you GPT-5, and they give you all the Anthropic models, and then they most recently have the GLM 4.6 model. The other thing that I think they've done really well is they've really thought about the ergonomics. For each model, they're clearly prompting it differently. They've really thought about like, okay, we're only going to support this model and how the models interact with each other, and the ergonomics work really well, where I will literally have the same type of request inside Claude Code and another one inside Droid, and Droid will just do so much better with the same model. I'll give you a very concrete example. I had a database migration that completely fucked up, and I was actually in a car going to IKEA to New Jersey. So I was in the car going over the Williamsburg Bridge.
New Jersey, not Red Hook?
Talk to my wife.
Okay.
She ordered the thing at the wrong place. And so yeah, she's driving this car, going over the Williamsburg Bridge. I'm there in the passenger seat, just going insane to Claude Code, being like, this database migration's fucked. And then I just took the same thing over, same model. It was Opus 4.1, and it just got it. 3 minutes. It was like, oh, here's the issue. Got it. And so they've done a better job that I think than Claude or the Anthropic team have in like giving the model the ergonomics and the tools that it needs. It's like, oh, here are all the tools that I need. And here's I think the right prompting. I don't know what else they're doing, but there's something about it where it's like, I feel so much more confident coming to Droid that I just don't feel in some of the other tools. I think the other thing about what your original question was like, how did I build this as a single engineer? I think also I always get shocked every time I talk to other people. We at Every we're clearly at the edge of how to use these things. I think for a very long time, I was the number one user of Droid. I've been ripping the most tokens, and it like surprises me. So like I'm on their max plan, and it was October 3rd to October 24th or something like that. I've already run out of tokens. Like I ran out of tokens well before time.
We got to call Ben Tossel and get you
get me some more tokens.
Yeah.
Because I think we're just like ripping them so much, and I think going into the deep end, there's a lot of people for maybe not now, but like the last time I spoke to people, they wouldn't use YOLO mode. They were afraid of using YOLO mode. And I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion for us. It was like, of course you're going to use YOLO mode. Why are you going to accept everything that it does? You're just going to let it do it. So I think really leaning in. I think letting go of the identity of I'm an engineer and I'm going to use Vim and I'm going to write code and blah, blah, blah. Like letting go of that identity and being like, when you really peel back the layer of what I think I am, is that I'm somebody who just makes things. And I don't really care how I make them. I care about like how it's built, and like I clearly care about the end product, but I don't care if I have an agent writing the code or if I'm writing the code. As long as it's good code and it does what I want it to do, does it really matter? You know?
But how do you do that? Because I think a lot of people listening or watching are saying, cool, great, but how do you actually be a craftsman if something else is coding for you? Isn't that all just going to be slop?
So let me open up my terminal. Before I share my screen, I think it's a philosophy of, you brought this up right at the top of measuring twice and cutting once. And I think this is actually the one thing that I've learned from like trying to build something that writes well, which is also just like looking at something and feeling internally what actually like calls out to me, and like, does that feel right or does it not feel right? And I think you could do that with a button. Like, does that button feel right or not? Does that spacing on that thing feel right? Does the not just the code feel right, but does the thing that I expect, the thing that Claude just ripped out, does it do it the way that I wanted to do it? But also further, does it add to the piece of the puzzle in the right way? Like LLMs can skin a cat in a million different ways. There are probably only a handful that you actually should be using that are like right or like actually fit the way that you want it to do. So I think a lot of like building this product has been feeling out like, okay, when I ask Claude to do something or one of the other models, does it actually do it the way that I want to do it? So if I share my screen, a lot of the ways that I use, and you could do a lot of this in Claude Code as well, but a lot of the ways that I use these tools is, one, I'm always doing multiple things at once. I think waiting around for the model to complete. And I think the worst habit that I got into that I had to like cut out was scrolling Twitter whilst I waited for an agent to complete. That is a just killer to productivity for me. And
what is it that you do? Because you do a thing that I actually started to copy for this. How do you stop yourself from scrolling Twitter?
So work trees is like the big thing. So
no, I was saying, so what I've noticed you do is you take your phone and you put it in another room.
Yes.
And so I started putting my phone next to yours.
And now we've confused whose phone it is. Yeah. So we have a couple of places in the office where there's just a couple of ledgers, or we have this beautiful every sign. I think to talking about like intentions is like one of the things that I try to do the moment I walk in is I take my phone out of my pocket and I just place it face down on one of these ledgers. And I leave it there. And I try my best not to look at it. And I'm always on Do Not Disturb. As you can see here in the top right corner, I'm on Do Not Disturb. I have notifications off. Like I have an Apple Watch, but like this notifies me about nothing. And I think it's really easy to be like, oh, now because of this tooling, I can do the job of 3 people as one person. And I have seen in myself and in other people that actually what people end up doing is they end up doing the job of one person, and then they just procrastinate or they do the other things in their life that they think they want to do. And I noticed in myself that I wasn't happy doing that. I really am somebody who's all in. And then if I'm working, I'm working. Don't talk to me about anything else. My wife hates that about me. And then if I'm not working, I'm not working. Like I'm trying to be present, intentional. If I'm with somebody, I'm not texting other people at the same time. And that's been really helpful. And I think it was also really important when working with like LLM models, because like programming before was I would look at the code, I would spend a lot of time, attention reading it, I would read it, tests would pass, I would spend a lot of time. And now it's like, no, I'm just going to let it go rip and I'm going to go do something else. And so what I think that's allowed, and it requires being really intentional, is just, can I do parallel things? Like, can I just do multiple things at once? And so one of the ways that manifests is I'll in one terminal tab, I'll have like 2 panes, or sometimes I'll have like 3 panes open. And I'm usually like ripping Droid on like a bunch of different things. So like here, this one I was fixing a bug, and like, in this one I might be actually earlier today, Kate gave me some copy edits inside the app. So I had Droid go through and like do those copy edits. But then here in another window, I've actually been messing around with some of our judging prompts, and I've been using like Python notebooks. So I'm like writing out Python notebooks with Droid. I have this other one here
and
where
just
I'm
to
actually
pause you, the judging prompts are like judging whether writing is good, and that's a sort of core component of making good writing is getting the AI to recognize if writing is good or not.
And I think to go on a quick tangent, really, I think the one thing that we saw about Claude 4 Opus specifically back in June or July or whenever it shipped, it's really good at judging writing and not rubber stamping. I think models before this you would give it some of its own writing, and it was like, yeah, my writing's great, it's a B+. Or you would give it other people's writing or other agents' writing, and it would always be like a B+. And there was a lot of like, tricks that people would do, like give it a rubric and then tell it that like, actually a 7 out of 10 is impossible, forcing it to kind of like actually change it but then everything would just be a 6 or like a 5.8. And what we found was that Opus was actually really good at reliably, repeatedly giving Boolean answers and like good pros as to why it was saying yes or no for something. So we have this one test internally where we see if writing is like engaging. Does each sort of sentence keep a reader engaged as you go through? And we found that like Opus 4 was the first model that would like reliably, almost every single time, would say the same answer, and it would say the same answer that we would agree with. That then also came over to Sonnet 4.5 and somewhat now to Haiku 4.5. Yeah, and that's like a really important part of the product, but it's also really important for us building this product, and for me building this product, of like, where is it that this needs to get better? And this is actually a feature that we're going to build directly into the product, so like the Spiral can kind of like judge itself using another agent to see where else it can improve. And this kind of helps us create this like feedback loop of being able to watch how good or bad are the outputs that come out of it. Also with people just telling Spiral, I don't like this. I think it's really the benefits of having, the one thing that we didn't have from the old product only had thumbs up and thumbs down, and that was really useless. With a chat-based product, people just say, I don't like this because, and we have, we're using something called Raindrop, which is basically like Sentry for AI agents, and we just get a report every single day of like, this is what people said they liked, and this is what people said they didn't like, and here's why, and I could just see the chat, and it surfaces it all up for me. So being able to see how people use the product and just read what they're saying to Spiral is really helpful in improving it.
And one of the interesting tangents that we've been down over the last couple of weeks is, and this is one of those things where I only ever read it, so I don't know if this is actually the right way to say it, but DSPy and JPA is how I say it in my head. For other people, maybe it's DSPy and GIPA. I don't know, but basically there's this prompt optimizer, DSPy, that is sort of like having a moment right now among AI people, where it will, basically you can give it a prompt and like an objective, and it will optimize your prompt toward that objective. And JPA is a specific method for doing that I can't totally explain, but it's a new and interesting way of doing it. And so one of the experiments that we've tried is giving me a bunch of tweets and then having me thumbs up and thumbs down them, and then give like concrete feedback to see if we can generate a judge that has my taste. Do you want to talk about that and what we found, what's worked and what hasn't worked?
Yeah. So we have a great piece on Every with Michael Taylor around DSPy. He's actually the one, he came here from the UK and sat in the office and like actually taught us how he uses it.
Does he say DSPy?
I don't know, but I think it's DSPy. I think DSPy sounds so much better than DSPy. Okay. Even though I guess like DSPy is probably the right way to say it. And yeah, it is this like kind of, when people look at it, for a very long time this year, I've been going on their landing page and I'm like, I have no clue what this thing is. And he did a really good job of explaining. And I think we have a video out where he's actually teaching me and Kieran how to use this, where he finds just ignore 80% of what it is and just use it as an optimizer. And when you just use it as an optimizer, it makes so much sense. You don't have to throw away all of your like frameworks that you might be using already in your like app, if you're using the AI SDK or whatever. Just use it as a promptomizer, extract the prompt, put it in your product, because it's very much built to be this like all-encompassing framework, but it's just really confusing. I find it to be. But yeah, using it as a promptomizer is great. And I think we can actually like look at that that judge that we created for you. The way that it works is you basically just give it a bunch of predefined labels with, generate a tweet about blah, and then we had you literally give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and then just write out your thoughts. And we would just start with a basic prompt to begin with, see how good did it do. So like the base prompt was about 58.8% accurate to you. And that was just a prompt that I asked Claude to come up with. So like just over half of the time, it would say the same thing that you would say.
It's not terrible, but
it's not terrible. Yeah. But like, you could flip a coin basically.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah,
right.
You're totally right. Yeah, it is terrible.
Especially if, this is just for writing marketing materials, but like 50%, like if you're trying to do something important, this is really bad.
Yeah.
And the way that it works is then GEPA, and I also can't speak to exactly how it works, but my understanding is that you give it like a metric for how it can, what it will do is it will generate a new prompt, and then it will test that prompt against your judges and the data that you've given it, and it'll see how close does this new prompt it's generated get to the sort of like gold standard, which is from you in this example, and then goes, okay, this prompt that I tried wasn't that good, so let me try another prompt. And so the way that I kind of see it is that it's just like trying as many prompts as it can until it finds something that's better. So it really is just sort of like throwing spaghetti on a wall and seeing if it sticks. And it, it will rip through tokens a lot. You can basically set it to a max number. So here I have like max 5 full evals. So it goes through 5 means it goes through 85 iterations. I don't really know what that means, but whatever. And so like here you can see it's just like here's one of the prompts it came up with, and then it came up with another prompt, and that prompt was 66.7% accurate. And so like it keeps going until it gets a little bit better. Here's another one that it tried that was 33.3% accurate, so way worse. And so the
just
idea
do
is
the inverse of that prompt, and it will be
exactly. And so like it's just it learns and it learns from trial and error, which I think is cool. Which is when I think about how I was prompting for very subjective things like this, it was just kind of trial and error, and I would work with Claude and be like, okay, the output kind of came out like this, but it's missing this thing. Give me a suggestion. Or, one of the things that I would do a lot before this, and I still do this, is I would find other people's prompting guides, and I would say to Claude, distill down the principles of these prompting guides and then help me. And like, that's somewhat useful, but I think this, at least for creating judge prompts, is a bit more, it feels a little bit more scientific. Maybe it's because we're in a Python notebook and there's percentages and stuff. But it's also allowed it to be like, oh, I can very clearly see the before and after. So then finally it spat out this prompt that was 76.5% accurate, which is a lot better than half. Again, not perfect, but we're getting closer and closer there. And then it like sort of goes through it and we can actually use it. So maybe what could be fun is if I stop sharing my screen.
Wait. Before you go there, I just want to know what is DSPy Dan? What is in the prompt? Like, give me a couple of things that are in the prompt, because I'm just, one of the things that's really cool about this is it's telling me stuff about how my brain works that I might not even know.
It's actually very simple. Like, if you asked me to write a prompt like this, like write a prompt that emulates Dan's judging, I would not write something this simple, which I think is kind of counterintuitive. It's just a simple list of things. And I don't think this is perfect, right? And it doesn't work all the time. And like, if I was to say, in the data set we gave it, it said 76%. I feel like it's probably more like 65% accurate to what like I would perceive as actually good content versus bad content. So like it definitely still needs some work, but like it's some very simple things, like simple, concrete, specific language, not vague generalities. And I think what's really interesting about this is past generations of prompting would be like really, really specific on the prompt of like, well, what is simple, concrete, specific language? And it would have like, here are like a bunch of examples of what really simple, concrete, specific language is. And what we've seen from doing this process is actually just letting the model breathe. And like, you know what, they're big enough, they have enough parameters, they have enough training there. They clearly know what simple, concrete, specific language is. Maybe sometimes it's maybe a little too buzzwordy, and so there's like stuff that we have to do there. But the models have gotten a lot better. Clear promise that gets paid off. I actually think that's a pretty important one. If I was to say like the kind of feedback that you've given me is a lot of that. Relatable, sometimes funny, focuses on topics that people care about, the proper tense, one clear idea. But like, what is bad content? It's generic openings that could apply to anything. It's the wrong tense. It's too wordy, breathless tone, chop slop, unclear, choppy syntax, telling instead of showing. So there's a lot of like, there's like some specifics there, like proper tense, but it's also principles of like telling instead of showing. I think the other thing that's interesting about this prompt here is like sort of the evaluation approach, like how it actually does that. It starts with a hook. Is the opening sentence surprising, counterintuitive, or is it generic and could apply to anything? And then next, always pull exact quotes from the content to support your points. So this is how it's evaluating. It's assessing the voice, looking for specifics. It's checking for a payoff. I think the thing that's the most surprising to me about this is how simple this actually is. Like if I was to, with Claude, write a prompt that did this, it would probably, this is 112 lines. It probably would have been many more lines of like text. And yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Well, let's test it. Let's do the newlywed games with DSPy Dan and Dan. And we'll do like a whole, we'll do a little like graphic here, and I'll give a thumbs up or down, and we'll see what DSPy Dan says, and we'll see if we match.
Okay. I'm going to find a tweet on my timeline. I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to send it to you, and then I'm going to paste it into DSPy Dan. And what I want from you, Dan, is a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Cool. Do you want any of my like actual feedback?
Yeah, that could be good too.
Okay. Does it gives feedback, right? Like
it gives feedback.
Yeah. So we should match the thumbs up and thumbs down would be the main thing, but I'm also curious about my feedback. Okay, so the tweet you gave me, and we'll put it up so people can see it, but the tweet you gave me was, I feel like the VC community is doing a disservice to the startup community ecosystem by constantly organizing all these events, especially on weekdays at 6 p.m. And I never understand how so many founders are able to make it to these leaving the office at 5:30 p.m. Makes sense from their POV. This is very thumbs down. Sorry, Flo. Okay, so first thing is starting a tweet with I feel like. Sometimes it actually really does work because it is it feels more casual and like something that you didn't edit, but also it lowers the impact of it. And so if you're using I feel like, you want to be pretty intentional about that. And because this tweet is very he's kind of going after people a little bit. I think you got to it would be better with a full send of, the VC community is doing way too many events, like organizing so many events. I think, you know what? I was only seeing part of the tweet. Okay. Because I was looking at it in the Discord preview. So it continues. So I feel like the VC community is doing a disservice, blah, 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 blah. I never understood how so many founders are able to make it to these leaving the office at 5:30 p.m. Makes sense from their POV. They're building a network and effectively running the equivalent of an enterprise sales motion, but in the end, it results in dragging the community. Too few founders dare to say no to 99% of the invites they receive, which hurts their business. The thing I like about it is there's something true here. And it feels very stream of consciousness. Like he just kind of was in the car on the way to something and was like, blah, 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 here's what I think. And I think that's where all the best tweets come from. And there's something interesting about the core idea of it, which is, if I had to take a little bit further, there are certain stable equilibriums in ecosystems where everybody in the ecosystem doesn't like it, but you end up stuck there. So like having so many events is it's one of those things where it's actually not good for anyone, because VCs are like, I guess I have to put on all these events and I'm wasting money on it. And people, I guess, show up, but I don't know if it's really that differentiated. And founders are like, I wish I could work. But everyone keeps doing it anyway because they feel like they have to. So I think there's a core idea there that's kind of interesting. But I think this would just hit way harder if it was. I think VCs are actively hurting the startup community by holding so many events, with maybe like one or two more sentences of why that is. As it is, it's a little wordy, and he's also going after VCs and founders at the same time. And it's, I think, a little bit, it feels like you don't necessarily want to open up a two-front war at the same time. So I give him points for an honest observation that there's an interesting idea at the core of it, but I think execution on this, it's not done in a way that allows me to be like, to light up and be like, yeah, you're totally right. I'm kind of like, I don't know, it's too long to read. And I think he's kind of making fun of me too, instead of like getting me on board with him, because I would be down to bash VCs, you know? Yeah, that's those are my feedback. Thumbs down.
Thumbs down. Because you said that thumbs down with such vigor when you first said, is it a softer thumbs down, or is it still a really strong thumbs down? That's me leading a little bit.
I think it is softer in the sense that I only read the preview, and so it looked like it would just cut off, like make sense from the preview was where it stopped, and I was like, what even is that? So I'm a little less vigorous, but it's still not a great tweet.
Okay, so this is what DSPy Dan had to say. So he gave the tweet a thumbs up.
Whoa!
But what was interesting was that actually, you said similar things, slightly wordy in places, a clear playoff, which is like, clearly it felt like he'd written this himself. It felt handwritten, not AI generated. But DSPy Dan felt like it was counterintuitive. Like the VC community is doing a disservice to the startup ecosystem, sort of like a bold contrarian take. Not something. So I think there's clearly still work to do. I think DSPy Dan is really thinking more about like, is more, what is this saying as opposed to how is it written? So like that is something we have other judges that look at like how are things written. So I think one of the things that we found, I kind of said this earlier, having a model do many things doesn't work. Having it do one thing is good, but sometimes that one thing isn't the whole thing. So it would be interesting to see adding this into some of the other judges we have, how it would act. But also I think this is going to be one of the things that I've come to accept is that a product like this is going to be always evolving. The models are going to change, Sonnet 4.6 is going to come out next week or something like that. And
that's not, I'm so tired.
And I think, GPT-5 was really interesting to use it, you have to prompt differently. There was a while where GPT-5 was the writing model inside Spiral, and the prompt was so different. It had all these XML tags, and it was like very spin. And now we've gone back to a Claude model, and it's a much different prompt. I think I don't ever really think there was ever a thing of like done when it comes to building products, especially software. I think it's more so evolving because the product itself is non-deterministic. You can put whatever you want in the chat input, and whatever else it wants is going to come out. And we want that to be outputs that we can. It's actually a really interesting problem because you want it to be outputs. If I was making Instagram filters, and if I was an engineer at Instagram, I never was, just to be clear. But if that's what I was doing and I was coding up a filter, I could be like, great, this filter is sick and it works for the things that and I never have to touch it ever again unless it breaks, right? But like, I don't have to. Whereas now, I'm like, I actually can't. I would love to say that I could stand by all of the writing that comes out of Spiral, but I can't. I literally cannot do that because it would require an infinite number of me looking at an infinite number of outputs, which is impossible. So it's a really interesting like shift in building products that I don't even think I've really fully come to terms with just yet.
I think you're right. Like good writing is alive. Like it comes from something that is alive and is honest to a living experience. And so anything that is static, it can be good for a while, but over time it becomes slop if it's static. And that's something that I think we're starting to grapple with and has some really interesting implications for the direction of this product over time.
Yeah. And I think it has implications for like what the next generation of models look like and like what they're trained on. And, like a lot of these models, AI-isms, I really think the AI-isms come from two things, which is one, I think we just get used to them. Especially I think like us, because we're looking at AI-isms all the time. But then also just like the amount of nonsense that was written on the internet over the last 15, 20 years and just how much of that is in the training data. In an ideal world, Anthropic would hire us to like prune the nonsense out of their training data and then train like Sonnet 4.9 with the every bespoke training data. That would be great. Dario, hit us up.
If you're listening, let us know. Danny, this is fantastic. I actually feel like I learned a lot. Like I said, so proud of you and what you built, and so excited for getting this out into the world, getting into people's hands, and also for what comes next. Where can people find you, and where can they find Spiral if they want to give it a shot?
So Spiral, you can go to writing.new is a domain. It's also writewithspiral.com. It's try Spiral on Twitter. You can also follow everywhere, and you will find links for it. And I am Danny Aziz 97 everywhere on the internet.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Of course.
Folks, you absolutely positively have to smash that like button and subscribe to AI and I. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show. It's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So do yourself a favor. Hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.